a minute or so for people to settle, and then we'll get going. Key things around logistics for the lab session and the hands-on sessions today. It's very difficult to be hands-on with 1,000 plus attendees. So what we tried last year, which we're trying to replicate a little bit this year, is to make sure that there's 45 minutes to an hour's worth of content to make sure that we're not stretching your attention spans too much and not giving you too much information in terms of overload. But then there is enough time afterwards for questions, hands-on workshops and work groups for people who do want to explore any of the topics that we're looking at a little bit more closely. So all of the themes that we're looking at in this session and in the following 3 sessions that are coming from our fantastic training team as well are very much part of the fabric of what we have in the Emarsys Academy, our online learning center, and all of our learning resources as well. The purpose of these presentations is to kind of explore some key themes and some key topics, unlock the potential and the value in some of those resources, and give you the ability to ask some of our subject matter experts some key areas of marketing, some key areas of our platform, and give you the opportunity to engage. So the hour and a half is very much split into half of it being educational hands-on presentation, the other half being open forum question answer and things like that as well. It has worked fantastically well in the past. I'm hopeful it works fantastically well for today as well, and we'll get started in that kind of format. My name's Alex Timlin. For those of you who haven't met me, I've been with the company for 9 years in various different roles. And I sit very much between the commercial organization and the product organization. So my role as VP of Client Success globally is to make sure that we're looking at retention, first and foremost. Our business is very much governed by the revenue that we get from our existing clients. We're very fortunate to be more than 100 million in revenue, and we're very, very conscious of the fact that that comes from clients who have choices. So one of the biggest parts about conferences like this is to make sure that we're engaging with our clients and potential clients in a meaningful way as possible. And I'm very, very lucky to have the role that I have, and I'm very, very lucky to engage with you all. After this session, during this session, LinkedIn, any other medium as well, please feel free to reach out to me directly for anything that we can do to help serve you better at Emarsys, either from a product perspective, a service perspective, or a marketing perspective. The feedback that we get from customers helps us build a better product, helps us build a better company, and helps us make sure that you get what you need so that you actually stay with us for the long term. Because like I say, we appreciate you do have options, and working with Emarsys is a choice, and it's something we treat as a privilege. So what I want to talk to you today is how we move from business intelligence to business impact. And one of the key things about that is over the last 6 years, we invested a huge amount of time, energy, and effort into standardizing some business intelligence tool sets for the use in marketing organizations. So for anyone in the room, has anyone been an Emarsys client for more than 5 years? Just Marco. That's a good thing and also a tricky thing. Before we actually built our own solution in Smart Insight, we actually looked at commonly available business intelligence tools on the market, and we went with the market leader at the time, a company called Tableau, which many people are probably familiar with. And what we looked at was, what are the most common business intelligence tools used within business, and how can we create pre-created visualizations and dashboards that businesses are already using, but kind of give it more of a marketing stint and a marketing lens. And after doing that, investing several million in trying to turn that into a product line, we struggled with adoption. And one of the biggest challenges that we had in terms of getting people to adopt business intelligence in marketing organizations is it's not really about intelligence on your customers, and it's not really about how to make your marketing better. It's about how to make your business better. And one of the things that we're going to be looking at in this presentation is the difference between business intelligence, knowing something about your business, and business impact, something that can actually impact the results in your business. And one of the things that we're looking at in terms of consumer analytics and marketing analytics is not to just present you with some information, but to help give you something that can make a change to the way that you actually operate, and a change in a way that you actually engage with your customers as well. So in terms of the presentation, in terms of what we're going to cover, we'll look at a little bit at the terminology to make sure that we understand the difference between information and insight as Emarsys see it. And by no means saying that this is a global definition, but it's something that we standardize internally and something that is used commonly in the market, but not necessarily universally in the market. And one of the things that we have learned in terms of how you make a meaningful difference to someone's business is to make sure you're talking in a common language. So one of the biggest points of a differentiation is we'll be looking at some of the key metrics that people are using, and we'll also be looking at how we're using these metrics, Security Masters. But more importantly, we'll be looking at what the output of the research from our data science team is around the learnings that we have from these metrics, from working with more than 2,000 brands, 4,000 accounts, and 4 billion consumer records that now live within our platform. So we're very, very fortunate to do a lot of the same things with a lot of different businesses to a large representative sample of the global online consumer database, consumer marketing population. So it means that we now know a lot about a lot. What we're looking to do in these sessions is to unpack some of these key metrics and unpack some of the learnings that we have around how these metrics are being used, but also how these metrics are being misused, just to help you understand some of the opportunities and some of the landmines that we've seen, just to learn from other people's successes, but also to potentially learn from other people's mistakes, including the mistakes of good people like myself. We make a lot of mistakes. We're highly experimental, and that does come with the risk of sometimes getting things that don't necessarily lead to the uplift that you'd be expecting. Now, I just want to explore, first of all, the difference between information and insight. And the key thing really is data isn't really meaningful. Data's just a thing. It's an indicator. It's a set of metrics, it's a set of numbers, it's a piece of information. So data itself is just simply a variable. It can be qualitative information, it can be quantitative information, but data by itself is not a thing, it's simply a unit of measurement. Information is where you start using data to understand patterns. So where data starts being used to understand how that thing has changed over time, or how that thing influences another thing, that's where you start getting information. It's about when data tells you something. So information is where you get an understanding of what has happened typically to data over time. The number was this, it's now this. The difference between information and insight is the number was this, now it's this. And if you don't do something, it's going to be this. And one of the key things we want to explore is how we get away from looking at 32-page marketing reports that we produce every single week, but don't necessarily change our behaviors, into what are the numbers that we can look at, how can we look at those numbers differently and use that to actually power different customer experiences, but also more importantly, different business outcomes. So there's a lot of numbers that we use on a weekly basis that are very, very important to our business, but they don't necessarily change the way that we're doing things. And what I want to do is just explore some of the numbers that we most commonly talk about with clients, and just have a look at where people have actually done a really great job at that, and where we've seen some of those numbers perhaps give people the wrong impression about their customers or about their business, and make some decisions that aren't necessarily incorrect, but just don't lead to the most valuable uplift or the most valuable customer experiences. So data is a raw product. It can be structured, it can be unstructured, but information is useful. Insight is what we're really looking to do, is to say, what can we do in terms of information that helps you understand what can I do differently to influence what that number is going to be in future? And what can I do to understand why that number is that number? And I want to start, first of all, with average order value. How many people in the room use average order value as part of your weekly or monthly reporting in terms of your organizations? It's one of the most universally recognized metrics. We have conversion rate as the number one metric that we see across almost all businesses, both B2B and B2C. After that, average order value, be it in terms of B2B or B2C, is one of the most common units that we see people using. But it's actually a very difficult number to calculate the more customers you have and the more geographies that you work in. So it's a really powerful metric, but it's also a metric that can actually lead to a lot of assumptions that could be holding you back in some of your kind of decision-making and promotional strategies and marketing plannings. So what I just want to do is have a look at what we can understand about average order value and what we can understand about our customers, and how we can potentially start thinking about how we can go a little bit deeper into that number and understand the data behind it to understand how we can actually influence it in future. So average order value should be that slide, but anyway, here we go. Average order value is typically the average amount of money each customer spends per transaction, and then divided by the number of, so basically you take all of your money, you take all of your orders, and you just divide one by the other. So the most common way of calculating an average order value is you take everything, divide it, and you come up with a number, an average order value. And one of the most common things that we do see is people are looking at their average order value and how it changes over time. This is information. So what we have here is an average order value, the data point, and the information is, over time, how is our average order value trending? Is it going up? Is it going down? And one of the most common strategies that we see amongst particularly e-commerce and retail businesses is if I can increase my average order value and maintain the number of orders that I have, I'll increase my revenues. So my business goal is to increase revenues. My strategy is going to be improving my average order value to make sure that I actually end up with the same number of orders, because it's difficult getting an order. The easier number to impact on paper is average order value. Make that bigger. That multiplied by that means more revenues. Very, very simple. But the problem with an average order value is, as we heard from the presentations yesterday, there isn't really such a thing as an average customer. And if you're looking at taking every single order that you have and every single dollar or euro or pound that you have and just dividing your revenue by the number of orders, it's a very, very large population to be dealing with for a lot of businesses. So if you have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of orders, the more orders you have, the further away that average order value gets away from your average customer. So the more orders you have and the more variation that you have in those orders, the more risky that number becomes. And I just want to illustrate this in terms of a common pattern that we see through our insight and our research, which is the difference in average order values from first-time buyers, from second-time buyers, from repeat buyers, and also from defecting or inactive customers. So this is a simple trend line that's plotted out using average data from e-commerce and retail clients across the entire client base. It's anonymized data. It's not something that we look at on an individual customer level, but it is something that we look at on an aggregate level to help understand patterns and trends, and it is something that's baked into the platform in terms of the benchmarks and the numbers that you'll see. So if you see in the platform, when you're actually going to launch a campaign, there are certain metrics that we give you that say, we predict that this number will be this. The way that we do that is by running patterns like this across the entire population to find trends. Now, what you will see in this trend is for first-time buyers, the average order value typically is much, much higher. Now, this isn't necessarily representative of your own business. This is representative of all businesses. And what we are seeing is that the average order value for a first-time buyer is typically much bigger than it is for repeat purchasing customers for the vast majority of e-commerce and retail brands that we're working with. Now, the reasons for that are unique to your individual business, but if we're looking at global trends, it means that how we're planning on our business is based on an average order value and based on the ability to monetize that customer over time. Your cost of acquisition is based and predicated on a number, which is if I get this as an average order value, and if my retention rate or repurchase rate is this, then I know in future I'm going to make this much money. But if the average order value of your first customer is drastically different to the average order value of a repeat purchasing customer, then it means that your retention marketing plan and your plan of monetizing that initial cost of acquisition can be flawed and can be mistaken, which means that your incentive and promotion strategy for things like win-back campaigns is based on a single number that doesn't actually reflect the customer data. So the key thing is a single number, an average order value, does not necessarily represent your entire customer database. And one of the biggest things that we're seeing as being a challenge for people is to drive that second purchase. Globally, across the entire population, 70% of e-commerce and retail businesses, particularly for online sales, 70% of purchases are from single order customers. And we're trying so hard to get that repeat purchase, that second purchase, but if we're using an incorrect data point to incentivize and drive that behavior, then it means that no wonder we're getting struggles in turning it from 70 to 60 to 50 and to try and monetize customers over time. Because the data that we're using is an average. And an average, a single number by itself, is inherently flawed. And I just want to unpack that a little bit, just to be able to look at the danger of a single metric. And this is all test data from a particular subset of clients. It's not real client data. It's anonymized and it's aggregated. But if we're looking at an average order value of £1,587 or euros, so our average order value is 1587 in this particular data set. Single number, average. Look at the spread. This is a test data set, but it's very, very representative of the work that we're doing with Smart Insight clients, which is now 750 clients are using us for real-time RFM modeling and also statistic analysis. And what we do see on a regular basis is this type of pattern, which is your average order value, your single metric, is built up of very, very different types of customers. Now, getting to a one-to-one individual customer level is difficult. It's an ambition. And unashamedly, we want to be able to get there, but unashamedly, we're not there right now. So what we're looking at is how do we start grouping and clustering people into meaningful segments that your business can understand, that will make a difference to your marketing. And if you're not already doing this, you need to start differentiating between an average customer, the mean or the middle point, but also high value and low value customers as well. And even if you start off with those 3 simple customer groups, it will make a massive, massive difference in the way that you see your business. And if you're looking at this is very representative of what we see, which is 150 for your average customer, but 4,500 for your most valuable customers. The most common 2 things that we see influencing this number are core marketing strategies for every business. How many people in this room operate an affiliate marketing program for your business? How many people have Instagram influencers that are on commission? How many people separate those people out from the ROI calculations that you do on average customer value? The last 3 client meetings that I've been to with large, fast-growing e-commerce businesses that are over 100 million in revenue have forgotten to exclude their affiliates from the purchasing customer data. Because their affiliate program running on Magento or Shopify just actually gets the affiliate commissions through as a sale. So they have a small group of people who actually buy £200,000 plus every single year from a business who has an average product value of £9. Clothing retail, average product value, £9. People spending £200,000 in their customer database. Their average order value is inherently flawed because their average order value has outliers. How many people here operate both B2B and B2C? Have wholesalers or trade accounts? It's a very, very difficult thing to classify. Did this purchase come from a customer or did this come from a wholesaler unless you organize your data up front? So most people don't do it. You try and do it after the fact. But again, we've had a client who assumed that their average order value was 40. They had 2 wholesalers in their customer database that were buying electronics products from an online-only business and selling them in their own physical stores. Those 2 people threw out the average order value from 40, where it was actually 18. It's a business selling peripherals in the electronics space. Having that big a difference in your average customer and your average order value is hugely, hugely risky to how you grow your business. Because if you think about your incentive strategy, your promotions in terms of your offers, your discount strategy, and how you incentivize your customers to make that first purchase and your repeat purchase is predicated on the fact that your average order value is 40. So their promotional strategy moved to, if you spend 50, I will give you a discount. Because their strategy was to improve their average order value from 40 to 50. So if you move your basket from 40 to 50, I'll give you a little discount. But the vast majority of people who are buying from them only buy at 18. How big a difference is it from 18 to 50? Their promotion strategy had data behind it. Their sales went through the floor, and they didn't know why. It took them 3 months to figure out that there were 2 customers actually throwing out the entire data point, because all they were looking at was columns, spreadsheets, and numbers. They didn't have the skill sets, and they didn't have the experience to have a look at those 2 dots that didn't even fit on the graph. How we actually figured out this number together was running a simple scatter graph. And the bottom end of the scatter graph went to 200,000. Like, why does the graph go to 200,000 when my average order value is 40? Because your average order value isn't 40, mate. There are some customers who have huge, huge, huge revenues that are throwing out your data set, and these outliers change your picture of the world. What we can look to do is to simplify the view of the world, to have a business conversation around how we have marketing impact. And the easiest way to do that is have 3 groups. Work out statistically what your median is, or your average is, and have a look at what valuable is and what low value is. Doesn't have to be 5 groups, doesn't have to be 6 groups, but those 3 groups, what's a low value customer, what's an average customer, what's a high value customer, will help you break down that single number, something that's very much a vanity metric for businesses, into something that can help you plan your marketing activities. And if you're not looking at data and you're not looking at the outliers, you can have a potentially incorrect picture of the world. Now, in the tools that we're using to run this for clients, we do actually suppress these outliers and we do go around it, but I would actively encourage you to look at our resources, our help site, and our academy into how we go about RFM modeling and how we go about statistical modeling to use it within your own business as well. We do not want this to live in a silo. We want this to actually change the way that you guys have conversations internally, because it'll make you get better marketing results. If you get better marketing results, you renew. So ultimately, we want you to get value from the product. We want you to renew. Our entire business model is about recurring revenue. So the key thing for us is to make sure that we're not offering professional services that are black box. We're not offering training sessions that you can only do. We want to make sure that you understand what we know about these numbers and why we know this about these numbers so that we can actually all collectively raise the bar. How do we use the number to drive value? If 70% of your customer database are normal customers, and then the remainder is split between gold and platinum buyers, they are inherently very, very different types of customers with very, very different behaviors. So it's not just about understanding the number, so what is your average order value for these groups, it's also about the population, how many people fall into these groups. And that's where we start looking at customer lifetime value. So for those of you who are looking at maybe, is it the right time to look at customer lifetime value? So I'm really focused on growth, I'm really focused on acquisition. Right now, my North Star is revenue, conversion rate, and average order value. I'm not at the point yet where I'm thinking about retention. You're always at the point where you should be thinking about retention, because almost every single marketing plan is predicated on turning that existing initial acquisition into a repeat purchasing customer. It is never too early to look and plan at customer lifetime value, because how that average order value is impacting over time, the number of purchases and how long it takes someone to become an active customer is key to the long-term success of your business. The stories of multi-billion-dollar unicorns failing have been really, really brought home by a story that was actually publicized widely and wildly from Groupon. How many people remember Andrew Masson from Groupon? Good. He was the CEO who founded the business. His entire business valuation, which went to north of $2 billion, was based on the size of his email file. And he said, I'm acquiring email addresses, and once I have them, I can spend exactly 0 marketing dollars on acquisition, and I can monetize those customers. I need to raise money right now to get more email addresses. And then, as and when we decide to focus on retention, I can then look at how to make money from those email addresses. That's how he built a $2 billion valuation. By ownership of an email address, by acquiring an email address, by looking at this cost of acquisition for an email address, but by the time they went into 15 different international markets, and by the time that they actually had critical mass in terms of group buying, building a category, it was too late. They'd actually burned through so many different customers in the US, so many different customers in the UK, that making that switch to saying, actually, I now care about my existing customers, I'm now ready to monetize them, meant that his customer lifetime value could never justify his cost of acquisition. He simply paid too high a price to acquire an email address on the proviso that whenever he wanted, he could turn it into customer lifetime value. The business was sold for pennies on the dollar. And there are many high-growth, fast-growth internet startups that have said, we're not yet thinking of retention. We're focused right now on acquisition, and what we will do is we'll move those levers a little bit further down the road. If you don't understand the levers up front, you don't know what you're building towards. And if that customer lifetime value is dropping, then you need to be readjusting how much you're willing to spend on acquisition. Customer lifetime value is the be-all and end-all of e-commerce and retail for a long-term, sustainable, profitable business model. Now, not everyone in this room needs to be profitable. I get that. But at some point, your investors, your shareholders expect you to be profitable, and they expect you to know that number. You don't need to use it in each and every part of your business, but you need to know it. And the reason you need to know it is if you wait to calculate it until you need it, it's too late. And what you need to look at in terms of lifetime value is, again, how can we actually get some insight into what's going on? And if the customer lifetime value, and you will use exactly the same metrics, if customer lifetime value is 1587 and it's up 10% year on year, that's information. My customer lifetime value is 1587. 1587 is my data point. The information is that it's went up 10% year on year. The reason that looking at these groups and what's actually influencing it behind it is really, really important. The insight comes from who is driving up your customer lifetime value. So if I know that the 10% year on year is being increased by my high-spending customers, that's a really important metric. Because it means I'm not getting a lot more customers. It means I'm getting some small quantities of very, very high-spending customers. If you're looking at customer lifetime value as a single metric, again, it's a really, really important, a really, really valuable metric for understanding your business. But to understand your customers, you need to differentiate between those with a low customer lifetime value and those with a high customer lifetime value. Because a small group of high-spending customers can throw out your averages. Same numbers, same scenario, just looking at through the customer lifetime lens instead of the average order value lens. If I get 4,500 euro spending, pound spending customers, it's very, very different to getting 50 low spending customers. In terms of your strategy of how you are acquiring and monetizing customers, if it's coming from high value customers in small quantities versus low value customers in high quantities, that's a really, really big thing. There are customers that we have in the German-speaking region that we're working with. Actually, how many clients do we have here from the German-speaking region? My favorite story that actually demonstrates how old I really am is how many people used to acquire customers from StudiVorset? Social network for students. Used to be able to get a huge amount of traffic from StudiVorset. Students coming, making purchases. Really, really cheap cost of acquisition. Really, really high rate of returns. Low repeat purchase rate, high return rate, lowest customer lifetime value of almost any acquisition channel in Germany for the best part of 4 years. But people weren't looking at the lifetime value of those customers. They were looking at the initial basket value of those customers. And the e-commerce engine dealing with returns wasn't linked to Google Analytics, which was linked to the online sale, so it looks really good. Cheap traffic, high volumes, lots and lots of customers with a low value. But if I get enough customers of a low value, it's worthwhile. I'm going to win some, I'm going to lose some. But that's looking through a single metric, average order value. Not looking at customer lifetime value, not looking at how you are monetizing that initial acquisition over time, led to a very, very, very wrong proposition for some really big businesses. Rocket Internet learned this lesson. Cost them 25 million to learn this lesson, but they learned this lesson. Cheap traffic isn't necessarily valuable over time. And lots of small value customers can change your average. Small quantities of really high value customers can change your averages. Having an average, a single metric, changes your view of the world. So what we need to start doing is to take it to that one level deeper to say, what's low, what's high? What's average, what's straight down the middle, but what's low and what's high? And the reason is, large numbers of low-spending customers can change the way that you acquire and retain. Small numbers of high-value customers can change the way you acquire and retain. It's how you use this information to drive your business is the key thing, but understanding what makes that number will make a big, big difference to the way that you're actually getting business performance and results. I want to switch a little bit from historic purchase data and historic kind of numbers and values into products and categories. So we spent a little bit of time talking about past purchase behavior in terms of just the number of transactions and the frequency of transactions to be able to do it, but there's actually a lot of insight you can get on product level data that can tell you a big difference about your business. In terms of Amas's terminology, defecting and inactive customers is a standardized way that we use to talk about customer lifecycle groups. So when we talk about defecting and inactive, it's uniform across our training, it's uniform across our product. I appreciate that you guys might have different ways of talking about churning customers or inactive customers. Zombies is quite popular at the moment. But we need to standardize it in the platform, and I can't standardize in 5 languages with the word zombies, unfortunately. That's not politically correct. But there's a lot you can learn from previous customers that can help you understand how you can actually move the needle within your business. In terms of defecting customers, when we're talking about a defecting customer of Amas's, it's someone who has already made a purchase, is still likely to make another purchase, but unless they do it within a window of opportunity, they're unlikely to do so again. Has made a purchase, will make a purchase, but you have a limited window of opportunity to get that customer. This is typically churn for a lot of people. A defecting customer is a churning customer. The language you used was deliberate because churn's not universal across business models. We had to get something that worked across a few more verticals. Again, feedback on how we classify is very much welcome, but defecting, you still have a statistical chance of getting back. Inactive is where you are statistically more unlikely to get a purchase from it. Has made a purchase, so an inactive customer is not an email address who hasn't bought from you. An inactive customer is someone who's made a purchase from you, but is unlikely to do so again in future. So two types of people. Has made a purchase, unlikely to in future. Has made a purchase, is still likely to, but you have a limited window of opportunity. You have a limited window to act. Two of the things you can use to act are to offer an incentive or a discount. Looking at their average order value, looking at their lifetime value. You can find out the appropriate level of discount to incentivize and monetize these people. But again, as long as we're using the two learnings that we had beforehand of separating out high value and low value, we can look at doing something with these defecting customers. How do I get this guy to buy again? I look at what he bought in the past, I look at the value that he bought, and I give him an incentive or a discount to get him to buy again. If my average order value was 40, I'll give you a discount on 40, or I might move the needle and say, if you buy something at 50, I'll give you a free gift or I'll give you a discount. Our promotional strategy is built on those two numbers we looked at before. It's what's the lifetime value, the future spend and the past spend. What's the average value, the next purchase that will help me unlock that future spend. But what's also important is what they're spending on. So what are the products, what are the product categories for these defecting and inactive customers? So the way that we calculate RFM is by looking at the previous purchase data, RFM, recency, frequency, monetary value. How many people are using RFM modeling in any part of your business? Quite a few, okay. Not assume that it's done. So it's basically recency, frequency, and monetary value is about just looking at the number of purchases over time. So frequency, number of purchases. Recency is the date of last purchase. And monetary is how many purchases overall in terms of value. So monetary is all the money that this person has ever spent. Frequency is the number of orders that this person has ever made. And recency is the last time they made an order. And it's the timing that's important for the defecting customers. So has made a purchase, but there's been X amount of time has passed, which means that unless they do it again, we're going to lose this window of opportunity. Statistically, people who buy again with a regular cadence. Like people en masse are actually quite predictable. The more people you have, the greater the data set, the more predictable the patterns are. Average number of purchases for an e-commerce client in the UK is 1.8. For loyal customers, high-value ones, it's 2.4. Almost universal across most business types. Unless you're selling beds and furniture online, it's very, very unpredictable. But if you're a furniture retailer who sells accessories and ancillaries, 1.8 is pretty much your number as well. It's people are quite predictable. Brands have an ability to put what they want to think onto their customer database. So how many people in the room run payday promotions as a marketing strategy? How many people have looked at how many people buy from you every single month? It's one of the most common strategies we have is to influence the frequency of purchase. And one of the most common business, and thinking back to what Brendan was talking about yesterday about being business obsessed versus customer obsessed, is if you run a promotion, I can get someone to buy from me every month. Show me the data. RFM modeling gives you a very, very good view of how often people buy, how likely they are to buy again, and what your window of opportunity is. So RFM is really, really important for that window of opportunity, time between purchases and time since last purchase. But if you're looking at just offering a discount and an incentive to someone and expecting it to move the needle, it will move the needle a little bit, but sometimes the problem's actually in what someone was buying and why they were buying. And trying to understand some of the reasons why people stop buying from you by looking at your product data can actually offer you really, really valuable insights as your business. What we've learned from analyzing a huge amount of data at Emarsys is there's a huge amount of potential in looking at the product categories that your defecting and inactive customers last bought from. By looking at the product and product categories and the product level information for your defecting and inactive customers to understand for these people who bought from you in the past but have stopped doing so and are unlikely to do so in future, or statistically very unlikely to do so in future, what is it they bought that they're no longer buying? And one of the most interesting things that we've seen across businesses is reason number one of why people don't buy is they bought something big that they don't need very often. TVs, cameras, peripherals. If someone's buying from a product with a really long life cycle, they're statistically unlikely to buy again. And it's because the product has a really long life cycle. For something like a washing machine, if someone, or a TV is a good example. TVs and peripherals, people are always trying to upsell, cross-sell, and monetize that transaction. If it doesn't happen within the first 24 hours, it's statistically unlikely to do so. Someone's moved on to something else. Big ticket items is one of the main reasons of people not buying from multi-category retailers. Reason number 2 is by far and away the most common in people who aren't own brand retailers or resellers. So if you're not manufacturing and selling your own products, one of the most common reasons that we see of people no longer getting purchases from customer groups is you simply don't have the products that that person bought anymore. It's their old product lines, their old product models, they're things that you used to have that you no longer stock. If you look at even department stores, they change their lines regularly, they change the brands they stock regularly, and sometimes the customer has a stronger affinity to that brand that they're purchasing, the product that they're purchasing, than they do to you as a merchant. So they love the service that you provide, they love the personalization that you provide, they love what happens in terms of the reliability and the returns policy, but you simply don't stock the brand that they bought anymore. And one of the biggest strategies that people use for keeping to grow and keeping to continue to iterate their revenues and to move into new categories is to do that. You look at categories that aren't working, and you optimize towards new categories to open up new opportunities and new customer groups. But that does mean you leave some customer groups behind. That's okay, but you need to understand it. If you're an online multi-category retailer, and we've had this with luxury fashion and also with a large amount of kind of clothing retailers, if the customer buys a lot of socks from you and you're frustrated that they're not buying high-end jackets, it's because that's not what that customer was. Your business might have pivoted, your business might have changed, but that customer and what they came to you for hasn't changed with it. You can change consumer behavior over time, but it's really hard, and it's statistically unlikely that you'll be able to do so. Consumers have a lot of choice. They're choosing to buy a thing from you. It's, as we heard from the presentations yesterday, very little of the things that you sell are completely unique to your business. You might make it in a different way, you might have different materials, but there's something similar out there in the entire internet for that person to buy. If you no longer stock that thing, it's one of the most common reasons for someone to stop buying from you. And if you're a multi-category retailer and you sell a small subset of really high average order value products, then don't expect someone who's bought one of those big ticket items with a long life cycle to necessarily buy from you every single month. And it's understanding these types of products that customers are buying is a really, really important thing because it gives you an indication of what they're likely to buy in future. So one of the key things that we're trying to unlock for all of our clients is this concept of affinity. To say, how can we look at browsing and purchasing behavior and past behavior as a leading indicator of what someone's going to do in future? And what we have learned is the biggest predictor of what someone's going to buy in future falls into 2 categories. And again, it's no secret. We open source this. We want you guys to know, embrace it, and to challenge the data as well, to help us learn. But there are 2 predictors that help you understand what someone's likely to buy in future. Predictor number 1, what they bought last. The most common purchase for someone to buy is the thing that they last bought. It applies to shoes, it applies to Wellington boots, it applies to clothing, it applies to electronics. The most common thing for someone to buy is a different color or a different version of the thing they bought last. And if it's not that product, it's within the same family. The second most common indicator of what someone's going to buy is what they last browsed. So basically, the 2 most common things that people are likely to buy from you in future is what they're looking at right now and what they bought last. That's how we calculate affinity. We just simply standardize that metric. We look at what the person browsed in the past, what they're browsing right now. We look at what they purchased in the past, and we give a weighting based on recency. If you bought something a long time ago, it has a lower weighting. If you browsed something a long time ago, it has a lower weighting. If they're browsing something more recently, then they're in the market for that thing or something like that thing. The affinity score that we have is calculated using those 2 levers. It's anyone who wants to know how we do it, absolutely delighted to speak to you to be able to do it, because it's a really, really important thing in your business to understand, how do I predict what someone's going to do in future? Look at what they did and look at what they're doing. Those two things will help you really optimize your business, because if someone's on site and doing something, browse no purchase is one of the most winning strategies you'll have. Abandoned baskets are easy and operationalized by a lot of people. Using browsing behavior to look at what someone's browsing and not purchasing is something people don't quite get around to, but it's way more powerful than your newsletter. Don't send the newsletter that you want to send to someone who's showing you and telling you what they're in the market for. Use that data to help them on that journey and find that product or that family of products to convert that opportunity into a purchase. Don't pollute that interaction with a brand experience just because your boss tells you to. Your newsletters are important. I get that. They make you the most amount of money. But intent is the single biggest predictor of what someone's going to do. And for those of you who are spending a lot of money with Google AdWords, Google have shifted their model to look at this as well. If you look at Google's functionality for AdWords, they've shifted to a category called in-market. They want to help you understand what this consumer is in the market for. How they do that is by looking at this. What's the person browsing? Google index every product on every website using AI. People don't do it. They give every product a category. Google's in-market functionality looks at what people are browsing right now and gives it a category in AdWords. So if you are looking to improve and optimize your conversions around a particular product, look at people in the market for that product right now. If you've got people on your website and you want to improve your conversion rate, look at what they're looking at and help them buy it. If it's not that, it's something like that. Affinity, likelihood to purchase, is one of the single biggest predictors of intent. And conversions come from converting that intent into a definite action. Don't suppress your behavioral programs for your ad hoc marketing programs. I love surprise and delight as much as the next guy, but I love people helping me find what I want to find easier. Reducing friction makes way more money than building experience for people who are just in the market for something. So don't substitute your behavioral programs for your brand programs. Supplement them. You still need brand marketing. You still need to differentiate. I'm not saying don't do it, but I'm saying definitely have behavioral programs optimized and prioritized over and above brand experience, because if they're not going to buy it from you, they will buy the same product or a similar product from someone else. That's why Google are using that for keywords and bidding. Customers are fickle. Take away the hard work, use the data, and use that to drive behavior. If someone hasn't bought from you for a long time, what they're most likely to buy is the same product they bought from you in the past a year or two afterwards. What we've learned from RFM modeling and what we've learned from previous purchasing patterns is sometimes customers are really loyal to us, but our expectations in terms of time frame are just wrong. The average amount of time between purchases for e-commerce brands for the vast majority of their customers is over 365 days. Average. Averages are flawed, I get that, but if you're looking at it as a single metric, if 365 days is the average time between purchases, some of the marketing that we do and some of our expectations are incorrect. How many people here are responsible for an email program? How many people suppress behavior after 30, 60, or 90 days? What happens if someone buys from you every year? They're not going to engage with you all day, every day, because they're going to buy from you every year. Sometimes it's for them, sometimes it's for someone else, but looking at the data and looking at these predictors is really, really powerful. And for people who aren't browsing your website regularly, the best indicator of what they're going to buy is the thing they bought from you last year. Have a look at your data. Have a look at your repeat purchasing customers. Have a look at your inactive customers who've made more than one purchase. What you will see is seasonality. What you will see is familiar product groups that happen over a period of time. We have some clients who have a product life cycle of 5 to 10 years. They have a really, really loyal following and a really loyal audience. It just happens every 5 years. That's not a bad thing. You can influence consumer behavior to a degree. How likely do you think it is to change a 5-year buying cycle into a 5-month buying cycle? Not very. BMW Finance start their keywords and attribution 3 years before you lease a vehicle. Your discovery for a BMW can happen up to 3 years before you lease the product. They're bidding on keywords on the expectation that in 3 years, you're going to take a finance package on a new 4 Series Coupe. But they know it's going to take you 3 years, so they've optimized their marketing towards it. They're efficient with their spending. They don't just blast you all day, every day, until you visit the website and look to book a test drive. Because if you don't book a test drive, they're going to follow you around the internet until you do. But in terms of their keyword strategy and their promotional strategy, they understand that bidding on that keyword between BMW and Audi is costing upwards of €1,000 in some of their core markets and hundreds of euros in others for every click. So if every click's going to cost you more than 100, you better be sure you're bidding on the right click. And if bidding on the right click means that this guy's in his research phase, I'm not going to bid again. As we saw from the customer journey from Ashwin's presentation from Google, some consideration periods are very long and very involved. That's okay. You can influence it, but you cannot change it. If you enable it and shape your marketing around it, then you can make huge, huge gains by understanding where to not waste your money. Understanding what people purchased in the past and understanding what they're doing right now will help you optimize your marketing towards those elements and get greater returns. 2 biggest takeaways. Big ticket items, problematic. Items you no longer sell, problematic. There is a third one that I want to throw in that we'll talk about a little bit more in our upcoming webinar around the holiday season, which is people who aren't buying for themselves. Gifting is the bane of almost every retail and e-commerce business because the person who is buying is not your customer. They are buying for someone else. The only reliable way we found out to be able to find who's buying for someone else is to ask. In your post-purchase programs, strongest recommendation, try and figure out, is the person buying for them or are they buying for someone else? Because if you don't ask, you will never know. The only other way you could know is with things like warranty data on consumer electronics or big ticket items where someone else registers the product. That works, but if you don't have a warranty and you don't have something to actually tie you to the end product, then you don't know who the product's for. You know who purchased, but you don't necessarily know who they purchased for, themselves or for someone else. If you have a big problem with single order customers, have a look at the types of products that you have problems with and have a look at whether or not it's applicable to this gifting category. You don't need to ask every single customer who they're doing it, but if you spot a trend or a pattern in your data of defecting customers are typically coming from a single product or a single product family, is that because the person that's buying is not your customer? And we've had a client who was speaking last year on the stage and as part of our sessions where they actually used this as a data grab. They actually used this to figure out who are you buying for, and for the person that they were buying for, they said, do a recommend a friend program for this person just to make sure that they like it, and if there's any returns, they can return it direct, and any problems with the product, make sure that they ask us. They used it as a marketing opportunity. So you get the person who's buying, but you also get the person who's buying for. The person who's buying for is the influencer. They're going to be the one that dictates the next purchase or whether they return it or not. You need to make sure that that person's happy, not the credit card. You don't need to make the credit card happy. You need to make the person happy with the product. And if you spot a trend or a pattern in this data, it's a really, really valuable marketing opportunity to actually optimize towards and build really, really meaningful relationships with customers. One of our clients who'll be speaking a little bit later on this afternoon, I hope. Apparently she's ill. Best wishes, Alex. Brand Alley use this data to their full advantage. So they're an online luxury outlet. So they are selling off-price premium clothing. So they are constantly on the lookout for things to sell, but also things to buy. What influenced the managing director's buying power is by being able to go to a brand and say, I have 250,000 people who want to buy your products and I don't have anything to sell them. His marketing campaigns are based on consumer data. His buying campaigns are based on consumer data. He can predict how much money he's going to make from products he has not yet bought, because he looks at what people have bought in the past, he looks at what people are browsing on the website right now, and he knows, I need products in this category. They've expanded their business, they've made their business more profitable by simply looking at what are people likely to buy and using that to go and buy products to sell to those people who are likely to buy them. It's a fairly simple business model, but it's only simple if you're using the data to drive some meaningful results. and looking at the product and the product category level data is very, very, very meaningful. So I would encourage you, for your active repeat purchasing customers, look at what they're buying, but particularly for your defecting, so likely to purchase, but within a window, have a look at why they're defecting or why they're inactive at a product category level, not just at the value. Have a look at what they're buying, not just how much they're spending. How many people in the room have a definition for an active customer? How many people in the room have a definition for your best customer? Good. An active customer, in a master's terminology, appreciate it's different in all of yours, but we need to have some universal terms. An active customer is someone who has made at least 3 purchases from a brand and does it with statistical regularity. So this person is buying from you repeatedly and is buying from you in a statistically valid period each and every time. For every client, it can be different. So when we're talking about active customers, what makes an active customer to you can be very, very different to what makes an active customer to you, but we standardize the definition. The value of the purchases, the time between the purchases can be different, but the terminology we keep the same. One of the biggest leading indicators we see of business health and success, particularly for profitable business, is their retention rate. Retention rate, in terms of how we talk about it at Emarsys, is your active repeat purchasing customers continuing to buy from you with the frequency that they buy at. We are not influencing the frequency of purchase. We are maintaining the frequency of purchase. Very big difference. The person is buying from you with statistically valid regularity. We are not improving or increasing the regularity. We are operationalizing around it, easy for me to say, to make sure that we get the person to keep doing the thing that they're doing. So an active customer is buying from you again and again at the frequency that is statistically valid for that group of people. One of the biggest things that we're working on is how do we get that down to an individual one-to-one level, but in Emarsys terminology, an active purchasing customer is someone who's buying from you with a statistically valid period. What's interesting about some of the data that we have, I hope, is the time it takes from registration to most recent purchase. It's looking at how long did it take to create an active customer. On average, we're seeing it be more or less than 1.5 to 2 years. So to get an active, repeat purchasing, profitable customer is taking 18 to 24 months. On average. Can be different for a lot of brands, but statistically, looking at the entirety of the clients that we work with, again, 1.8 times per year is the average number of purchases, which means that we're talking about a relationship that you're building with a customer that starts off with them signing up to your email program, creating a login on a website, or downloading your app today, and going on to be an active repeat purchasing customer in 2 years' time. That's your customer journey. And as we heard from Ashwin, we heard from Brendan and a few other guys yesterday as well. Before you can actually impact your customer's behavior, you need to understand your customer's behavior. And if your active repeat purchasing customers, if your best customers don't become your best customers for 2 years, that's a really, really important piece of information. Because it means it's not about sending them a daily campaign, a daily retargeting campaign, a daily multi-channel campaign, and if they don't react to them within 30 days, sending them a direct mail piece. It's about understanding when to send these pieces of information. So we need to understand from time they first interacted with you to their most recent purchase, on average, how long has this customer been with you? How many purchases have they made to make them get there? And as you see, the median value is 3. 720 days it takes to make an active customer, and on average, they're only making 3 purchases. What's important is what are they most likely to buy, and what are they most likely to buy in future? Why this is really important is sometimes you change your categories. So if you have a small group of really loyal customers and you change your strategy or you change your product line, that can have a big, big impact on your revenues. But you won't necessarily see it straight away because the people don't buy very frequently. Over time, they're really loyal to you, but it might take a little bit of time before you see a change in your merchandising or a change in your buying actually impacting your revenues. And we do see for some people, they're surprised where after 3 or 6 months, they all of a sudden see a drop. Like, where did the drop come from? But you had a new marketing campaign, a new brand refresh, a new launch that spoke to a whole different audience and a whole different group of customers that managed to get you that initial spike in acquisition. But in terms of the long tail, you missed off in terms of your retention. And you have different customers. And particularly for people who are in really fast growth startup mode, if you think about how much your business changes in 2 or 3 years, it's frightening. You used to have a WhatsApp channel. You decided last year that Snapchat was a really important marketing vehicle for you. Might not be anymore. But there could be a group of customers who did interact with you through that channel, did buy products that you had at that time, but you've just moved away from it. You've understood that it didn't work. But it's really important to understand who it did work for. Because for those people, they're not necessarily going to engage with you anymore. That's not a bad thing, but it is a predictable thing. So if you could understand who your active customers are, what actually makes them tick, and how often it makes them tick, then you can actually start planning for the longer tail of your campaigns. And the longer tail of your campaigns could be 365 days. You won't see the impact on your retention rates for a year or more in a lot of instances. Which means that marketing is hard because you don't have the ability to sit with your managing director always and say, look, I'm going to get you results from this guy, but it's going to take me 2 years. Has anyone been brave enough to have that conversation internally yet with a finance director? I have that argument with my CFO in terms of cost of acquisition. And we work on 12 to 24-month contracts, and he's still annoyed. If you're a retailer, it's a whole different ballgame. If you're trying to explain to a finance director that someone's only going to buy from you every 2 years, that's a scary-ass conversation if you don't have data. But what I do know about finance directors and CFOs is they love data. And if you show them a spreadsheet, they'll get very, very turned on about that data because it helps them run their business more effectively and more efficiently. If you can tell your finance director or your CFO how to improve your cost of acquisition and how to improve your retention rate, you're doing his job for him. But you're also speaking a common language about your customers and your behavior. And this is one of the biggest things about business intelligence versus business impact is, are the people who are operating your business intelligence tool even bothered about your customers? Are they bothered about your marketing, or are they bothered about the cost of your marketing? Do they care about the impact of those marketing activities, or do they care about your budget? And it's how we bridge those gaps with data like this to say, do we really understand our customers and our behaviors and optimize towards it rather than trying to influence it too much? You can influence it a little bit, but BMW are not going to get someone to change a year's, 2, 3, 4-year purchasing cycle into 5 months through sheer will alone. But what they can do is understand the life cycle, operationalize it around it, and make sure that they cut costs and become more efficient and more effective. One of the biggest things that everyone in this room can take from data is, how do I become more efficient by understanding my current customer behavior and actually mapping towards it? Don't map your customers to your business model. Map your business model to your customers. Because the data does not lie. Your customers will tell you everything you need to know about their behavior by looking at what they've bought in the past and what they're looking at right now. But you need to actually want to use that. And it's a really hard conversation because the people who manage budgets don't necessarily care about your customers. They do often care about revenue and revenue products. So if you can bridge that gap to talk revenue with the revenue people and get what you want, you'll get closer to more meaningful outcomes and investment in the programs that you want to run. But if you're making the assumption that your average order value is this today, your retention rate is this today, and it's going to be that in future just by doing the same thing, that'll get you so far, but product level data does have a huge, huge impact on what's happening. The products you buy and the products you sell. The customers buying and the customers returning them is a really, really big impact as well. And the key thing for us is, if we understand how long it took someone to be active, how many times they buy, what are they buying, at least you can better understand the impact of your marketing over time. If we're looking at how we do this here at Emarsys, like I say, the terminology is really, really important. It's universal to us, but it's not necessarily universal to you. How much is the person spending? Customer lifetime value, average order value. Both numbers have meaning. Average order value tells you the average basket value, which is really important for your retargeting campaigns. You can't just base on customer lifetime value alone, because it means that it could take 3 years before you see a return of investment. I don't want anyone to get fired. I want you all to get promoted. Do not base your marketing programs around customer lifetime value alone unless you're absolutely sure it's the right thing to do. How much each basket costs you is a really, really important metric, but it's not the only metric you should care about. Definitely peg your retargeting rates to the average basket value and make sure that you don't exceed it. But in terms of your acquisition rates, look more closely at the customer lifetime value. How much are you willing to pay to get a customer on the basis of how much they're going to make you over a 2 or 3 year period? But acknowledge it's going to take a 2 or 3 year period. And when it comes to your retargeting, when it comes to your win back, make sure that you're understanding the value of those purchases and how long it's going to take you to get there. Those two levers, how much are they going to spend and how often they're going to spend, will help you make a massive impact to your business, but also have a more meaningful conversation with management, with finance, and also with marketing. And we often see sales, marketing, and finance just don't have a common frame of reference to talk about customer data, which means your conversations become around Google Analytics and your budget. That's okay, but that's a business metric. That's helping you run your business more effectively. You are selling things to people. Understand what you're selling and who you're selling it to. How much, how often, how long. Understand what is currently driving your best customers to be your best customers. How long does it take? What are they buying? What made someone good? How do we then operationalize our marketing around that? And like I say, payday promotions, statistically, are some of the least successful campaigns that we see in terms of customer retention. They're really important in terms of acquisition, but what you will find is it's just a promotion. It's just a sale. You're getting new customers. It could be called anything. But if you're doing a payday promotion and you see a spike in sales, great, but have a look at who from. Because the expectation is it's helping you with retention. Every month I'm going to run a payday promotion, and every month I make more money. Yeah, you do, but it's an acquisition campaign. It's not a retention campaign. For your best customers, how often are they buying? Every 3 years. How much have you managed to influence that number over the last 3 years? How many people have looked at how long it's taken, so time between purchases, how many people have successfully managed to impact the time between purchases in their business? Got people to buy from you more frequently, more quickly. The single hardest thing to do in marketing is to get someone to buy from you more frequently in the timescale that you want. It's really easy to map to what the customer wants, but it's the single most difficult thing to impact is the time between purchases. How we improve frequency of purchase is by actually post-purchase campaigns. The window of opportunity to get someone to buy is immediately after someone's just bought. That's the best time to improve your frequency and the best time to value by looking at what they could buy as well as the thing they last bought. That initial window of opportunity is the only window of opportunity you've got to drive frequency of purchase up meaningfully. Because after that, it's typically another year before the event happens again. What the customer is in the market for is largely down to the customer. And this doesn't just apply to e-com and retail. How many businesses here are in the travel sector? Online travel agents, airlines? Yeah. My favorite ever campaign, speaking with a client, was a train operating company, where they're getting people to take the train because it's cheap. Works. They were like, okay, we're selling a lot of cheap train tickets, but we're not selling the really valuable ones, so we want to target people to go and take a holiday domestically. Makes sense. It's really difficult to make someone to want to take a holiday. If someone's going to take a holiday, they decide where they're going to go on holiday. But making someone think, oh, actually, yeah, I'm going to go to Cornwall. It's 6 hours. I'm not going to go there for a day. You want me to go to Cornwall? Great. I'll have a fantastic experience when I do, but just because you're telling me to go on holiday doesn't mean I'm going to go on holiday. They were really surprised that the campaign didn't work. Same with airlines. We've had clients in the airline sector where they're like, okay, I really want to influence the way that people go on holiday, so if we make something cheap enough, exciting enough, and really promote the destination, then we'll get more people to go on holiday more regularly. You can influence where someone's going to go on holiday, but when someone's going on holiday is really, really, really hard to influence. Time between purchases is very much a customer-led decision, and it's about you leaning into it rather than trying to influence it and enforce it. You will have some success in influencing it, but the single hardest thing for you to do is to influence the time between purchases. So the best thing you can do is operationalize the time between purchases and understand when not to spend money on someone. If someone's just bought from you, make sure that you're making as much money as possible from that transaction. If someone bought from you 3 months ago, don't spend a ton of money on following around the internet to drive that second purchase, unless it's statistically likely to do so. Look at your data at how successful you've been at getting someone to make a purchase within 3 months of their last purchase. Do the analysis, have a look at how your customers are behaving, and look at how you actually work with that. There will be a small group of customers who are really loyal and will buy from you with regularity. But there are a small group of customers. Treat them differently. Look at a loyalty program, look at a rewards program, look at something that helps you recognize and reward these active repeat purchasing customers. But acknowledge and understand that it took them 719 days to get there. So not every customer who downloads today is going to join your loyalty program and purchase from you 9 times in the first 6 months. Understand what the pattern is right now and understand how to cater to 2 different audiences. The people who are really loyal to your brand, but understand the path it took to get them there. And if you understand the path it took to get them there, it will make a huge and meaningful difference to your marketing programs. I want to spend a little bit more time on product data, because this is one of the most surprising but influential statistics that we've actually done with customers across almost every category. How many people here analyze their top products? I think half of you are lying. But one of the most surprising things about business is, on average, for every single e-com and retail client that we work with, so more than 1,000 individual brands, more than 2,000 accounts, and again, billions of consumer records, across every single customer data point that we're looking at, for an individual brand, the median result is for 12% of their entire revenue to come from less than 10 products. There are less than 10 products that historically have made up at least 12% of your entire revenue. This includes clients who have more than 100,000 products in their catalog. Have a client with more than 100,000 products in their catalog, but 20% of their revenue for this particular client is driven by less than 10 products. It's actually 7 products. So if you know it's a multi-million-dollar business, if you know 7 products are driving huge percentages of your revenue, it makes sense to create programs specific to those products. Not a generic email with product recommendations to say, if you like this, also like this. It makes sense to have a look at these products and educate the customer on why to buy that product from you. Because they're in the market for that product, and that product is a key revenue driver for you. For these products that are key revenue drivers, have product-specific campaigns or category-specific campaigns to educate the customer on why to buy that from you, because it's one of your most valuable things you sell. Don't try to convince them to buy something else. Try them to convince them to buy that thing and the thing that goes with that thing. Not generic black box recommendations, product-specific campaigns that say, if someone's on your website looking at this thing, help them buy that thing. In the consumer electronics space, 49% of the things that people buy, on average, are less than 10 SKUs. We're fortunate enough to work with Canon and Sony in multiple territories, and they have leading products. There are 3 products for both of them in their digital camera divisions that absolutely blitz everything. And if someone's in the market for that camera body, you need to make sure that they're buying that camera body from you. Their cost of acquisition is linked to it, their customer lifetime value is linked to it, their education to minimize returns is linked to it. They have product-specific campaigns to get people to buy those marquee products. One of the biggest things you can do is have a look at your outliers. Which are the single products you're selling a lot of, and which are the single products driving a lot of revenue? Different things. Which ones are you generating a lot of orders through? So a lot of transactions, a lot of customers. Which ones are you generating a lot of revenue from? They are different, but it helps you a great deal in terms of acquisition and retention. So products that sell really well bring you a lot of customers. For those products, we want to operationalize towards that product and make sure that we're selling that product, but look at ancillaries. Look at what goes with that product, because you're selling a high volume of products, but at low values. So if you have one of these SKUs driving a lot of revenue, but it's actually through a lot of mass, and we find this a lot with like socks and underwear. If you've got cheap products that actually bring in a lot of customers, whether it's batteries, whether it's underwear, whether it's t-shirts or basics, sell that product to as many new people as possible and monetize that transaction. Those products will get you customers, but you need to understand the outlying products that go with that product to make it worthwhile and valuable. So if you sell a lot of products at a low value, Make sure that you sell that product. Don't convince them to buy something more expensive because you'll turn them off from that sale, but convince them to buy that product and the thing that goes with it. You can learn this from your data very, very simplistically if you're very focused on looking at what you're looking in what you're looking for. The best-selling products by revenue in terms of value are typically the bigger ticket ones. So, like I say, for customers like Sony and Canon, they know the difference between a big ticket item and not. And they know the difference between using this information to make a real big difference in their business or not. This is one of my favorite campaigns in terms of how a brand has really revolutionized their marketing. Because this campaign is 7 years in the making. This campaign goes to people who bought the last generation camera before. They introduced a new model for a digital camera body for the first time in 7 years. And the people they launched it to first were their existing customers who bought from them 7 years before, using their warranty data. So someone bought from a physical retailer a product 7 years ago, they kept that data, they built a relationship with the customer, and they used that information for a really innovative campaign with a very, very low cost of acquisition. Why it was genius, in my opinion, is they offered a trade-in. Anyone who speaks Mandarin or in the room, what they're offering is a trade-in on the previous camera. We know you're a loyal customer and you bought from us in the past. We want you to get first access to a new product before anyone else in the world. But you need to come to our stores and speak to our executives in store. And you need to bring your old camera. And we'll give you a discount on a new camera. When they're in the store, they found out that their sales associates are the best people at cross-selling lenses, accessories, peripherals, and anything else that goes with that body. People who buy online only know exactly what they're looking for. They're in, they're out, they leave it alone. People who go in store, speak to an associate, get educated, and they actually increase their average order value by 300%. From a warranty that someone registered 7 years ago. You cannot sit there and think about a campaign like this. You really need to care about your customers, your data, and your life cycle to think about, if I know my product has a really long life cycle, what can I do with that information to really drive a meaningful impact on my business? It's a very, very specific example, but the reason that I use it is every single one of you will have that one specific example in your business. You might think your marquee product's a coat, but in reality, there are 50,000 people buying socks from you. Don't try and sell them a coat. Sell them more socks. Help the customer get what they want from you again and again with the least amount of friction. And look in your data at the outliers. Who are the really high-value customers? Who are the really low-value customers? What products do you sell in bulk versus what products do you sell in value? Those 4 different dimensions will make a huge, huge difference to your business, and it's easy enough to do if you're focused. And it isn't something you'll be able to do in a day, but it is something if you commit the resources to do, you will be able to move the needle inside weeks, not months. And when you do that, this is where we see customers with retention rates of 65%. Average Smart Insight customer, retention rate 65%. I can get someone to keep buying from you, but I can't influence the frequency of purchase very easily. I can tell you who's an active customer, I can tell you when they're defecting, but I can't make them buy again with a great deal of regularity. But I can tell you when to not waste your marketing dollars. And I can tell you which products are selling really well, and I can tell you who wants to buy them, but I cannot force them on people who don't want them. But if I understand the people and I understand the products and I can operationalize towards that, you can create 4 or 5 meaningful personas or segments that you can actually double down on and make a lot of money from. And as we'll hear from the client presentations over today and a little bit tomorrow as well, there are people who are doing this and doing it really, really well. But they are not company obsessed, they are customer obsessed. They acknowledge that their business will make money if they understand their customers and pivot towards that. They do not try and force their customers to do the things they want them to do, because it's really hard and it's statistically unlikely they'll be able to do so. With the exception of this one lady in the front, there are very few people who have influenced the frequency of purchase. And it's just because it's hard. It's not impossible, it is hard. But what's easy is to look at what your customers are doing and help to reduce friction in that in the process and understand why did they buy from you, what did they buy from you, and how often they're going to do it. And the best indicators of what someone's done is what they've done in the past and what they're looking at your website right now. If you use the data to guide your decisions, you will make more money and have better outcomes and be able to go home a little bit earlier, I hope. But if you sit there on a whiteboard and a spreadsheet with a couple of post-it notes to figure out how you can influence consumer behavior, let me know the output, because I'd really be interested in how we operationalize that here at Emarsys, because it's really, really difficult. People are individuals. The best way for you to actually individualize the treatment is pay attention to what they're doing and help them do it again, and again, and again, and again. And even if it takes you 3 years, even if it takes you 7 years, even if it takes you 5 years to attribute that initial keyword purchase on Google for a BMW finance package, it's worthwhile because you understand your customers and you've built your business around what customers do, not what you want customers to want to do. There is a shed load of content. I wasn't allowed to swear. And we appreciate that a lot of this is different in terms of how we've taught you before. A lot of this is very similar in terms of how we taught you before. Our biggest ask of you guys is to help figure out how we can translate this message to you with more regularity. So we do want to have more of these sessions like we run in London. On a regular basis, we have the Academy sessions there where we try and do topics like this. We do have our online resource. We do have a playbook that everyone in this room and everyone who registered the event is going to get as a follow-up to this as well. You've got 13 minutes left. I will hang around for anyone who has questions. If not, I'll let everyone rest, recuperate, and get a coffee before the next presentations as well. Thank you so much for your attention. And I'm genuinely not going anywhere. I'm very approachable. I'm gigantic, but I'm approachable.